Welcome to the France 24 debate. It's decision day for the UK. Over 46 million people registered to vote in the Brexit referendum. I think that's some kind of record. And in the run-up to voting day, the polls have the Leave and the Remain camps neck and neck, or maybe at each other's throats as well. The campaign has been marked by bitter rhetoric, sometimes outright insults, even the murder of a British pro-EU lawmaker, Jo Cox, by a man linked to far-right and anti-EU groups didn't stop the invective. The facts seem to be that people have made up their minds. Years of anti-EU press in the UK have denigrated the view of just what the EU does, even in places where it's patently obvious. Brussels has granted vast sums of money to improve and to help and made a real difference. Scotland, Northern Ireland appear to be voting Remain. Wales, in spite of nationalist Plaid Cymru's in stance, seems to be on the brink of voting for a Brexit. And then there's England. That's the question. Depends which England you live in. Our debate, Brexit, Britain decides. But who knows what happens next? Our guests are here to discuss where the UK goes from here. And they have their views. Let's start by introducing Amber Minogue, a British stand-up comedian who lives here in Paris. Good to see you. Have you voted?
I can't vote.
That is an injustice and a minor tragedy. You'll tell us more about that later, I am sure. On the other side of our studio, Pierre-Jérôme Hénin, former deputy spokesperson of the Elysée under Nicolas Sarkozy, no less, and former advisor at the European Commission. Sir, I'm looking forward to your views. Does Britain belong in or out, in a word?
In, of course.
In, of course.
There's no question about that.
More on that in a moment, thank you. Andrew Lillico will be joining us from London at some point during this programme. He's chairman of economists for Britain. Kenny Imafidon is an ambassador of Bite the Ballot. He's awaiting us at a distance. Kenny, good evening to you, sir. You're from a group that tries to encourage young people to vote. Are young people coming out?
Well, I guess if you look at the polls, it shows that only half of young people will turn out to vote in this referendum. However, in terms of speaking to people on the ground, it's there's a clear indication that a lot of young people will turn out to vote.
Let's hope that that happens, because all the votes need to be counted, of course. And it's very much their future that's at stake. Also with us in London is John Mills, an entrepreneur, a Labour Party activist. He is also chairman of the group Labour Leave. John Mills, as you can see, is stood with that man with his finger in his ear, François Picard, who is usually in this position. And we'll be joining these gentlemen in a few moments for their points of view. Let's start, though, here in the studio with a look at the day so far in the UK.
David Cameron is one Brit who doesn't want to quit the EU. Around the corner from Downing Street, the Prime Minister cast his vote, ending a 4-month-long campaign. Adding weight to the pro-European pack, Jeremy Corbyn checks his box in his Islington constituency. And Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon gives Remain the thumbs up. On the other end of the spectrum, exit backer Nigel Farage expresses awe about casting what he says is a historic ballot.
I've wanted this vote, all my adult life, because I was 11 the last time we had a referendum on this subject. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Torrential downpours overnight haven't dampened the enthusiasm of voters who queued at polling stations from 7 a.m. local time this morning. Turnout is expected to be as high as 80% according to the Electoral Commission, up from the 66% who voted at last year's general election.
I think this is a critical decision for the UK, basically. So it's important that people vote and we make the right choice, I hope.
So I think it is one of the most important days, and I think it's one of those ones where every vote counts. It's not about which borough you will live in. I think it's one of those ones where every vote counts, so it's very crucial.
A record 46.5 million registered voters will be asked the question, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? Voters can cross one of two boxes, remain or leave. The stakes are high. The outcome could reshape the EU. A knife-edge referendum. Opinion polls have given both sides narrow leads in recent days. Ballot boxes will be transported to one of the 382 counting venues across the UK after polls close at 10 p.m. local time. The final result is expected in the early hours of Friday morning.
In the mist there, we saw the Union flag. My vote's been cast by proxy. My son, who's 18, voting for the first time, cast a vote on my behalf in the UK. Thank you, Harry. Amber here didn't have a vote in spite of the fact that you're British. That, of course, sums up one of the problems of living abroad.
Definitely. I mean, if you've been living abroad for more than 15 years, you lose your vote. So, you know, and that's a tragedy because a lot of people living abroad and who have been living here a long time, whether it's France or anywhere in Europe, are very much interested in this vote. It sort of affects them directly, and yet they have no say.
Which is really, I mean, it's crazy. As you're directly affected, you should have a say.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of... Go ahead.
Do you think that the Britons living abroad would have, on an important basis, voted for either the Remain or the Brexit? What do you think?
What do I think? I think they'd have probably voted to remain.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
But it doesn't depend on sort of what the financial interest is, because some people, I mean, I've heard tell of people in Spain, for instance, who have a lot of money stashed away in the bank, saying, well, you know, we want to get out and keep on ourselves.
Couldn't we sum up the situation of the Britons living abroad by saying that they are, in a way, immigrants? And like, for instance, the Britons living in Spain are immigrants in Spain, so they know exactly what an immigrant is. Whereas all the campaign for the Brexit has been based on the immigration issues, the Britons living abroad can pretty easily say, that's ridiculous what you say about immigration. So they might have voted in the majority for the Remain, yeah.
By leaving, they'd be directly affected. Their rights, you know, their right to travel, their right to live there, and also their finances. There's a lot of people who've retired and are living here now. If Britain exits, you know, they're going to be in a very tricky, difficult situation.
So it affects expatriates, it also affects young people, and of course, let's bring in our guest over in London, Kenny Imma Fidon, who's the ambassador for Bite the Ballot. Tell us about Bite the Ballot, Kenny, and tell us whether it's been working.
So Bite the Ballot is a movement to encourage young people to become change makers and encourage young people to register to vote and obviously turn up to vote in this referendum.
What have young people been saying to you, Kenny?
Well, it's a lot of mixed views. Some young people are for Remain and some of them are for Leave. So in terms of the polls saying that a lot of young people are more likely to Remain, we've actually been engaging with young people. Actually, to be honest, there's probably a larger group that are undecided than who actually want to Remain or Leave.
So, undecided. And coming back to the studio, I understand it's between 11 and 16%, the number of people who are undecided. That is a very significant number, is it not? Which could make the big difference.
Yes, of course, and it's a problem that we see in every European elections. The number of people who don't vote is increasing on a regular basis. Whose fault is this? I think that the politicians have a very big responsibility by not assuming. I'm taking the example of France, for instance, where the politicians that do assume the European choice made by France are not very numerous. You can count them on the finger of one hand.
I like that very much, Pierre-Jérôme, because normally people say blame the journalists. You said blame the politicians. That's very good. Would you agree, blame the politicians?
I could blame the journalists also. We can come back to that afterwards.
I could take it on the chin. It's okay. Amber?
I think that there is a large percentage of people who just don't know, and I think that's partly to do with the campaign. It's been incredibly ugly. There's been a lot of facts going back and forth which contradict each other, and people just don't have much understanding of exactly what the EU is all about. There's this great ambivalence about the EU in Britain, and not just in Britain, all around Europe. I think whatever happens in Brexit, this is an important moment to address that ambivalence and perhaps, you know, encourage people to understand to a greater degree what's going on.
What I'd like to do now is just take a quick taster of what's happening in London, where François Picard, who is hosting a special Brexit debate for us tomorrow, is, well, François, as I normally know him and find him, is in a pub. Good to see you there, François. Tell us about the atmosphere and let's hear from your guests.
Well, we have a scientific poll for you, Marco, and we have Jo, who's with me. He is for remaining in the European Union, and we have Pri. You voted Leave.
Yes.
I'll start with you.
All right, good.
Why did you vote Leave?
Well, it's basically the members who run the EU. Whenever we try to make an opinion in a case and point of view, nothing seems to register with them. It's hard to actually gauge what they're actually thinking, what they want for the UK. And the UK tries to express their opinions, but it just doesn't seem to get heard because it gets lost with the other countries.
Brussels isn't listening.
Oh, that's what I think, yeah. It's very hard to get through to them. There's a set opinion, there's a set mandate, and that's the way it's going to be, and there's no other change on it. And the UK has got some good opinions to put forward as a country in itself. It's a vibrant, strong country with with good positives to give. So it's just trying to convey that opinion to them.
Jo, you're for Remain. Tell us why.
So, first of all, I don't think either campaign has made a particularly good go of the arguments and persuading the British public that they should vote one way or the other. But for me, I voted Remain because there's a scouting phrase. I'm an old scout, and in scouts the phrase is be prepared. And I don't believe that the Leave camp are prepared for the amount of change that would be made by leaving.
Hang on, that's the sole reason, the fear of the unknown?
So the fear of the unknown is a big factor, yeah. I think a lot of people who will be voting Remain will not just be relying on the fear factor, as Boris has played so kind of vividly too, but the fact that the Leave camp can say they can fix problems, but until you prove it, the proof is in the pudding. And unless there's actual, differences that they can prove are going to happen by leaving and that will benefit the UK public, why would you put everything to risk?
All right, so you're afraid of the unknown, but what about the dream of a united Europe?
The dream of a united Europe for me is very much a dream. There's so many cultural differences and languages within Europe that actually it's one of the real strong points of Europe. We're so different and diverse that we bring in all kinds of things that other countries such as Australia and America can't deal with, and we manage to make them work. And that would be a real shame to lose it just because we're not getting the rub of the green at the moment.
All right, you know the expression, be careful of what you wish for? What happens if it is Leave? What will Britain look like? Well, we heard there'll be a run on the pound and this sort of thing.
Yeah, there probably will be. There'll be a bit of a panic on as well, a bit of fear in it as well, and it's just a matter of building up the strength and the inner strength as a country to move forward, as a country together. And I think that could, just be something positive that we could do as a country together and be individual,
All right, so a split, and Mark, just to tell you, people like Jo have been telling us that it's been very acrimonious, more so than in previous campaigns. People have been split throughout Britain. There's also a split between multicultural London and other parts of England. There's a split between young and old. It's been a very divisive time, this campaign.
Divisive indeed. François, thank you very much indeed. Keep your rival sides there apart. I'm sure they can share a drink and discuss it in a very placatory manner. Let's get some response from here in the studio. Pierre, Jérôme, Henan, you were shaking your head a number of times during that.
Yes, well, I just want to go back to the point
Go ahead.
Talked about in the previous interview about the youngsters not showing up for the elections. In 2014, for the last European elections, the people from age 18 to 25 didn't show up. They didn't vote, and the one who voted in majority for the National Front. So how sad is it to see our youth not voting for the European project?
So is that a sense of a sort of a detachment from the whole political process? Is that the politicians' fault?
Yes, I think so. I think that young people are not interested anymore as they used to be in the political process, and it's a way of defying and showing their negative thinking about that.
Amber?
And
maybe. I mean, I think that, I don't know about the statistics in France, but I think that has been overwhelmingly, they've said that younger people would vote to Remain in Britain. And I think it's very interesting. I hope that, if anything, this whole campaign would kickstart their interest in politics and hopefully awaken them to what's going on in Europe and, get them a bit more interested. So I'm not sure it's the same in Britain.
UKIP in 2014, the National Front in France in 2014, have won the European elections. What has been done since? Let's take the case for France, for instance. What we've just been hearing about this person having this beer. I'd love to have a beer, but next time.
Wouldn't we all? Wouldn't we all?
Who's in favor of the Brexit, about Brussels, is such a typical example of what we hear day and night without anyone answering to these people. Brussels, what is Brussels? It's a city with buildings and people working in the European institution. Yes, Brussels does not decide. Brussels does not impose anything. Whenever something applies in Europe, you have a British minister sitting at the table of the Council of Ministers who said, yes, I agree to do that, or no, I don't agree. But let's stop talking about the civil servants in Brussels, overpaid and underworked, that would impose things to the European people. This is absolutely wrong. And what really bothers me is that no one explains exactly how it works. The Commission, the European Commission, proposes text. Then this text, they go in the hands of the minister, transportation, agriculture, trade, justice, and then it goes into the hands of the parliament for which we vote for. So yes, there is a democratic process, and Brussels, please, once and for all, does not impose anything. The only power that the European Commission has in itself is in matter of competition. Yes, in that matter, the European Commission has a power. Elsewhere, no.
I mean, I agree, and I think Britain is very much stronger in Europe, but that's not to say that the European Commission doesn't have problems that could be addressed.
Of course.
One of them is about communication, people understanding what they do, and understanding that it is a democratic place, you know.
Absolutely.
But also, there are improvements that could be made. There is a lot of red tape, you know, it isn't always very clear what's going on. I think that hopefully the best outcome of the Brexit, I think, would be that Britain stays in, of course, but they address some of these problems and they consider why there is this ambivalence, why people are upset, why people are wanting to vote to exit the European Union, and how they can sort of refine the love for Europe.
We will get onto that in the second part of our debate and many other issues, of course, revisiting our man who's getting young people out to vote, or not, as the case may be, and bringing in all our guests. Thank you for the moment. Save those opinions. Stay with us. More to come after a very short break.